Welcome to The Story. It is Friday. I'm David Molko in for Pat Doris. All the ways to get in touch with us are at the bottom of your screen. You can email us. The address is thestory@kgw.com. Use the hashtag TheStoryKGW on Twitter, or if you prefer old school, nothing wrong with that, leave us a voicemail. By now, you know that number. It is 503-226-5090. Let's get started. All right, welcome to week 5 of the Senate Republican walkout, and we have a big development. The Senate Republicans came back to the Capitol. Now, before you get your hopes up, no, not for those reasons that a lot of people were hoping for. Instead of forming a quorum with Democrats and voting on the big stack of bills waiting for them, a group of Republicans spent last night in a room forming an unofficial committee. Okay. So what does this mean? Well, it turns out they say they want to investigate corruption in Salem and hold lawmakers accountable for ethics violations. To that end, they formed the new Joint Committee on Oversight and Accountability, and last night they held their first meeting. Okay, yeah, they certainly have a lot to talk about. There have been plenty of scandals in Salem this year. For example, there is the resignation of Secretary of State Shemia Fagan because she was moonlighting for a marijuana company. And then, of course, the OLCC playing favorites and setting aside top shelf or rare bourbon. You'll notice the video doesn't look great. We're going to talk about it in a second. But first, Republicans say they are sure there is more corruption out there. Here's the deal. As far as we can tell, this is completely unofficial as a committee, which means it doesn't seem to have any real power. They couldn't even get their meeting live streamed on the legislature's website. They had to have someone record it with their phone and then stream it on Twitter, hence the video. The Republicans say they have asked Democrats to join said committee, but say no one responded. And it seems that voters may not be the most interested either. The public comment period backfired on the Republicans in a big way. Instead of support for the new committee, they got an earful from some constituents about those walkouts. Now, you're not going to see people commenting since this was cell phone video and not official legislature video, but take a listen.
Oversight means delinquency, dereliction, fault, skip, and boo-boo. Here it's used in a sentence. Dang, Tina, using taxpayer funds for Republican legislators' salaries and per diems while they don't even show up to vote must surely be an oversight. Accountability means the obligation to explain, justify, and take responsibility for one's actions. It is commonly used in the context of people that are responsible to the public, such as politicians, by making their actions visible and having consequences when those actions are not acceptable. Here it is used in a sentence. Well, I'll be diggity damned if Oregon voters didn't already decide definitively that legislators were going to face accountability for these cowardly walkouts.
And I know with my job, I had to show up for work every day. And I had to do all the duties in my job, too. I couldn't choose which programs I could or didn't want to do. I had to do everything that was assigned to me by my boss. And I'm asking the same thing for all of you, for all the Republican senators. Show up on the floor, do your job. You don't have to vote for the bills, do your job.
And I'm also here to express my concern about the fact that there's a walkout and we're not getting it done in the legislature. And I'm actually here to ask you all to go back to work. If you don't like the bill, then vote no, but please don't just walk out, have a tantrum, and put everything to a standstill.
It was a little colorful, wasn't it? We reached out to the Republicans to see if they had any response to the constituents' pleas that they go back to work. The Senate Republican office told us creating this unofficial committee and streaming a meeting on Twitter was them working. We knew that opening up the meeting for public testimony would likely mobilize left-wing activists, these are their words, who are angered over the constitutional protest. This was not a surprise. I did find it ironic that many testifiers were telling Republicans to get back to work as Republicans were in the Capitol doing just that, working. That is a stark difference from past walkouts. Meanwhile, the Senate is scheduled to meet on Monday, and Senate President Rob Wagner says that if Republicans do not show up, he's going to start fining them. The Senate voted yesterday to fine senators $325 for each day they do not come to work and keep lawmakers from having a quorum. That is the same amount they are paid every day, by the way, and they have been paid for the last month when they have not come in. Senate Republican leader Tim Knopp firing back, saying Wagner, a Democrat, should pay their fines, pointing to the bill around abortion and gender-affirming care, the one that has brought things to a standstill. Knopp writing, President Wagner is insistent on facilitating an unlawful, uncompromising, unconstitutional agenda. We suggest Wagner pay our fines since it is his behavior that galvanized our protest. if Democrats want us to provide a quorum before June 25th, they must agree to follow Senate rules, follow the law, and work to put forward constitutional bipartisan bills that don't violate parents' sacred right to love and care for their child, end quote. All right, we know that is a lot to digest, and we know, you often have a lot of thoughts on the walkout. As always, you can send them to thestory@kgw.com or leave us a voicemail. That number again for you, 503-226-5090. Well, it is June, which means it is Pride Month, and a global survey has found that more people are identifying as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or queer than ever before, especially young people. So we're going to show you a graph from NBC News. It shows that nearly 20% of people in Gen Z, that's people born after 1997, are LGBTQ. And the numbers have gone up with every generation, about 10% for millennials, but less than 5% of boomers who consider themselves LGBTQ. Now, the sample size here was more than 22,000 adults in 30 countries. For many, this year feels different, with a record number of anti-LGBTQ laws introduced throughout the country. We're going to show you another graph. This one's from CNN. Their information is coming from the American Civil Liberties Union, and you can see a big increase, top to bottom, in legislation targeting LGBTQ rights in the last 6 years. More than 400 bills introduced in the last year. These are things like restricting access to gender-affirming care, sports, and restroom regulations, even discussing LGBTQ identities at school. Well, the Human Rights Campaign find that very few of those bills actually get signed into law. They reported that last year, 91% of proposed anti-LGBTQ laws failed to cross the finish line. But here's the thing, even the introduction of those bills appears to have an impact. That's according to advocacy organization The Trevor Project. Nearly 2 in 3 young people said that hearing about potential state or local laws, especially ones that affect school, made their mental health a lot worse. At the same time, we want to talk about acceptance, because according to GLAAD, that's an LGBTQ media advocacy organization, they actually found that acceptance is at an all-time high, in part because of better representation in the media. GLAAD surveyed more than 2,500 adults throughout the country and found that 84% of non-LGBTQ people support equal rights now, and that seeing them in the media has helped increase familiarity and comfort. These are the words from the survey here. 80% of people surveyed were comfortable with LGBTQ plus people at their place of worship. 74% were comfortable seeing same-sex couples hold hands, and 66% were comfortable, again according to the survey, learning someone in their family was transgender. Pride celebrations, by the way, they originated with the gay rights movement. You might have heard about the Stonewall Uprising in 1969 in Greenwich Village, which was essentially a protest in New York against police brutality. But there is a whole lot more to it than that, as is typical with these things. So let's take a look at how we got here.
Pride Month is celebrated each year in June to honor the 1969 Stonewall Uprising.
It's really the beginning point of the modern gay and lesbian movement.
The mafia-operated Stonewall Inn was considered one of the most popular gay bars in New York City in 1969. Around that time, being gay was illegal in New York.
LGBTQ individuals have undergone great oppression and invisibility in society.
It was also illegal to serve alcohol to a gay person throughout the state until 1966. Many gay establishments operated without a proper liquor license, making it easy for police to raid gay bars and other places.
Back in the 60s, there were many laws on the books that criminalized the simple act of existing as a person who was LGBT, and that manifested itself as over-policing of the community.
On Saturday, June 28, 1969, New York City police in plain clothes raided the Stonewall Inn. Officers justified the raid with a search warrant, authorizing the police to investigate the illegal sale of alcohol at the bar.
Law enforcement would come into LGBT bars and, just arrest the patrons for being.
Primary sources available at the Library of Congress detail how the turning point came when police tried to put a lesbian in a patrol car. Officers forced the woman into the vehicle. In response, about 400 people outside of the bar tossed objects such as coins and bottles at law enforcement.
It turned into a whole protest movement. All sorts of marginalized groups were fighting for their rights and fighting to be recognized.
It was also illegal to wear fewer than 3 items of, quote, gender inappropriate clothing in New York in 1969. It was informally known as the 3-article rule, or 3-piece law. At Stonewall, police arrested several cross-dressers and at least 2 drag queens.
They realized they needed to do something to resist these kinds of oppression.
Around 4 a.m. the next day, the crowd at Stonewall dispersed. But by the evening, thousands of people showed up at the bar and in surrounding areas to fight for LGBT rights. The protests continued into the next week, with law enforcement violently clashing with protesters.
They were infringing on our rights. They were arresting us. They were beating us.
Over the next several days, LGBT supporters pushed the gay rights movement. On the 1-year anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising, gay rights activists organized the first Christopher Street Liberation March and Gay Pride Week in New York City.
And they started the marches in New York to celebrate that, to celebrate the fact that they stood up for themselves.
About 3,000 to 5,000 people attended the march. Activists in other cities, including Los Angeles and San Francisco, organized Pride celebrations too.
Very quickly, it had a global impact, not only in Europe, in other parts of the non-Western parts of the world.
In the U.S., the last Sunday in June was initially celebrated as Gay Pride Day to recognize LGBT people and history. The day grew over time to a month-long celebration.
Pride is a celebration of all the things that the LGBTQ plus community never had. If we don't learn from the past, we're going to repeat it.
Yeah, the celebrations have grown. The acronym, as you'll notice, has grown too. Well, in the past year, some of the biggest attacks on LGBTQ plus people have come against drag performances. The state of Tennessee, for example, passed a ban on performances in public spaces, and anti-drag bills have been introduced in more than a dozen other states. So we thought we'd ask a local and celebrated drag performer about all of that. Poison Waters has been a drag queen in Portland for the past 3 decades alongside the legendary Darcel, who passed away earlier this year. She stopped by KGW this week to chat with Laurel Porter on Straight Talk. Here's a preview.
What we feel is that those laws are trying to push back, take us back. You know, we say the phrase going back in the closet. To say that drag shouldn't be in public, well, that's where it used to be, underground in basements. Nobody knew about it. Well, now through all the hard work of all of the mentors and all of the heroes in our past that helped bring us to where we are today, why would we then want to throw all their work out the window and go backwards? We're not ready to do that, and I don't think we will. The folks in the other parts of the country, I do feel terrible for the other drag performers. This is what we do. We perform. We're out in public. We're out engaging with audiences that choose to engage with us. The misconception is that drag queens are just running amok, forcing ourselves into schools and churches and libraries, and that's just not the case. We're going where we're invited, and no one's required to come to the show. So folks that want to participate, come to participate, and it's all fine.
Well, there are some conservative critics of drag queens who claim that the art form sexually grooms children. How would you respond to those claims?
I think that's the most bizarre thing, because the folks that are saying that are the ones that have put that in their mind and put it out in the universe. No drag queen I ever met thought there's nothing sexy about this, Laurel. This is the most uncomfortable I ever am. There's nothing, I don't think, appealing about any of this in that way. It's just the furthest thing from any of our mind. We're, characters. We're like clowns. We're here to have fun. We want to educate people, entertain people.
I think a lot of people watching may never have been to Darcel's show plays, Darcel 15, or to a drag show. Can you describe for us what a drag show is like for people who've never been?
Sure. Darcel is so fantastic. There's a lot of clubs and a lot of restaurants and hotels and bars that do drag kind of, I'll say, pop-ups. Well, Darcel's, if the doors are open, we're having a drag show. That's what we do. And Darcel was so smart that, 50 some years ago, to think of it as a theater. Darcel came from a theater background, so our club is built like a theater. There's a stage and curtains and dressing room and backstage. The audience comes in, you're seated in theater seating, rows of chairs. You watch a 90-minute show, and then you leave. It's not like a traditional bar where you hang around and drink and socialize. It's not that sort of a thing. So imagine if you're going to a Broadway show or the opera or the ballet. It's the same scenario, except we're all in drag on stage. And so our show is a majority lip sync performances, choreographed dances, audiences with groups or singles, individuals, and everybody's dressed as flamboyantly as we can. Darcel made many of the costumes that are still used in the show at the club, and every performer is different. We have a cast of 7 right now, and all 7 are completely different. So our audience always says there's a little something for everybody.
Is there audience interaction?
There is, you know, again, a lesson from Darcel is how to meet people where they are, you know, make it as a safe space. And when people say that, it doesn't just mean a safe space for LGBTQ community. We have, you know, a Midwestern fella who's there visiting maybe his gay brother or his gay child. So we need to make it safe for them and let them feel comfortable too. You know, we want everybody to feel seen and supported. So we are on the microphone telling jokes and interviewing people, where you're from, what's your birthday celebration, that sort of thing. And then also some of the performances with audience consent. You know, you can, if you put a hand out, you want to come up on stage and dance with one of the performers. It's all very simple. It's practically Disneyland, but with cocktails.
Well, as I mentioned,
I love that. Disneyland, but with cocktails. You can catch Laurel's interview tonight with Poison Rotters on Straight Talk. That's at 7 here on KGW, or anytime on our KGW YouTube page. Happy Pride.
It's set to become Portland's only 5-star hotel. And at the Ritz Carlton, rooms will be going for $500+ a night. And some of the residences, big word for condos, are priced at more than $8 million.
We feel this will be part of the sort of breathing new life into the city and into this area of downtown.
Though it seems just months before opening, the majority of those penthouses don't have a buyer. So what happens when you build it and they don't come? When the story returns.
Welcome back on this Friday. The Ritz-Carlton in downtown Portland is set to open sometime this summer. It's been under construction since the beginning of the pandemic. Downtown Portland was, you know, a different place when the hotel and its luxury condos were announced. That was way back in 2019. What 4 years that was. But even then, a 5-star hotel in the Rose City, especially with the Ritz luxury reputation, raised more than a few eyebrows. Since then, travel has changed, especially business travel. Downtown Portland has taken some big hits when it comes to its reputation. And while there will be a food hall downstairs called Flock on the home of the former Alder Street food carts, there's still a lot of questions about the hotel and its penthouses. Tim Gordon met with the hotel's general manager today.
A new tower demands attention on the city's skyline. The 35-story Ritz Carlton, Portland, is a modern, dark glass building in downtown, looking grand from a distance. And up close, getting a million little finishes before a late summer opening.
It's a lot of fun to create what the experience is going to be for our guest. Be in on the ground floor, hire all of the team, and make sure that you bring the right people on board.
Marie Brown is general manager overseeing what will be Portland's only 5-star hotel, with 251 rooms starting at $575 a night and going up from there. Already selling.
The system's been open for quite some time, so we're building bookings and very encouraged about the pace of that, so it's very good.
So far, we're not allowed inside, but these renderings show some of what to expect. An elite hotel with many amenities, Brown says, showing off the best of what Oregon has to offer.
The designers of the hotel did an amazing job of just incorporating everything that's special about Oregon, whether it's the coastline, the forests.
But this $600 million building on Southwest Washington Street is more than a hotel. The top third of floors are condos for sale, with penthouses going for nearly $8 million. 132 condos, and we're told nearly 30 are in escrow. On the bottom floors, office space, hotel meeting rooms, and retail. This is a mega multi-use building. So can Portland sustain this high-end place after all it's been going through? On the hotel side, Brown feels good about the future.
The interest is overwhelmingly positive in the property, and we feel this will be part of the sort of breathing new life into the city and into this area of downtown.
Tim Gordon reporting there. Well, still ahead, we're going to look back at the history of people of Chinese heritage in the Northwest and what those living here in the 1800s left behind that helps tell their stories.
That contribution of these folks to the early economies of the state has largely been lost or under-recognized.
Though archaeologists at Fort Vancouver have found something, or a lot of somethings, they want to share. That's up next on The Story.
Next at 6:30, a brush fire blazes in Clackamas County, with some residents warned to be ready to evacuate. Why it could be a troubling sign of what's to come this summer. And police departments get creative with new legal restrictions on what they're allowed to do, how some officers are using new technology to catch thieves. That's at 6:30. I hope to see you then.
Welcome back. Let's get to a history lesson courtesy of what is under the soil at Fort Vancouver National Historic Site. Now, this weekend, archaeologists are sharing some of their discoveries with a collection of stories that have to do with Chinese heritage in the Northwest. Stephen Redlin has a preview.
I love talking about archaeology at an archaeological site.
Chelsea Rose is coming to the Fort Vancouver National Historic Site with findings dug up across Oregon.
Early Oregon especially was a very multicultural place.
She's been digging for signs of Oregon's Chinese heritage.
Were there focuses in the area around the Northwest here?
China was actually way more dialed in to the West Coast. They came over to try to look for a better life.
The Chinese that sought this new life were miners and railroad workers, but also worked agriculture, fishing, and cannery jobs. Prejudice and unfair laws buried their history.
And that contribution of these folks to the early economies of the state has largely been lost or under-recognized.
At Fort Vancouver over the decades, archaeologists have been digging to restore its history.
The everyday workers at Fort Vancouver, the everyday soldiers of Vancouver Barracks, a lot of their stories are told through archaeology.
Museum curator Megan Huff says that as early as 1850, Chinese men worked in a variety of roles at the fort.
This is the aircraft that was flown by Leah Hing here at Pearson Field. Leah was the first U.S.-born Chinese-American woman to earn her pilot's license.
Reclaiming and honoring these accomplishments are part of the reason to bring in Chelsea Rose to present her investigative archaeological findings. She's speaking at the Visitor Center on the Fort Vancouver National Historic Site. The talk is free, but registration for the Saturday event is suggested.
You know, there were Chinese cowboys in Grant County.
The project focuses on Oregon's rural places where historically Chinese people were established. Now, there are no descendants, and few Chinese people live there. Archaeology is how to retrieve the history.
In John Day, we had to dig really deep to find the historical occupation level of 100 years ago.
Personal items from established homes were covered and lost. Now found, they're coming back to light. What did they use? What did they eat?
Are they hunting these species in order to supplement their diet? Is this a favorite new recipe?
The ultimate goal is to bring history back to help make the future.
And I think really people will go in with one idea of Chinese history in Oregon and they will come away with another.
At Fort Vancouver National Historic Site, I'm Stephen Redlin, KGW News.
Coming back to light. I love that idea. That's it for us this Friday. I'm David Moko. Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to be back with you on Monday, and if I do not see you tonight at 11, have a great weekend. Meanwhile, Laurel is here with your headlines. Matt with a brilliant 7-day. The news at 6:30 is right after this.